What's up, y'all? This is your girl, Megan. Welcome back. Today, I wanted to do a natal chart reading that was congruent to some world news taking place at the moment, or some things that are circulating and making their rounds in terms of media, social media, so on and so forth. So, I don't know if you guys are aware, but I came across this on my Twitter feed initially. So apparently there was a man by the name of Christian Toby Obumseli, I think is how you pronounce his name. And apparently he dated a woman by the name of Courtney Taylor. Now, as you can see in the picture here, he was killed by this woman. They were allegedly boyfriend and girlfriend, and she was a white woman. I believe she is some sort of OnlyFans content creator, okay? And according to those who are close to them, they had a very toxic relationship. Well, it hit its pinnacle on the night of, I believe, April the 3rd, which was this past Sunday, if I'm not mistaken, when she apparently stabbed Christian to death in his sleep. They say in his sleep, but she stabbed him to death. Inevitably, he's not here. He's unalived, and she is responsible for it. Now, following the incident, she was detained by authorities. However, they released her on what you would call a Baker's Act, which is basically when a person's mental health is in question, right? These are people who have to undergo psychiatric evaluation. So, it's kind of a way to get out, or it creates wiggle room in terms of maybe the consequences that are going to be handed down. In other words, a lot of people who are able to have some type of, mental background or whatever the case may be, in certain situations, they're actually pardoned, or maybe, let's say if you commit a crime and it is justified or verified that you do have some type of psychotic break, mental episode, then they'll put you in a psych ward as opposed to locking you away in prison. And as we all know, these are privileges that are more so allotted to white people. White people have the privilege of pleading insanity and things like that, more so than like a black person. Now, before you get to crying and, playing the violin, I personally am kind of unaffected by this. I do not wish death on a person, so I'm not celebrating this man's death or anything of that nature. But it is worth mentioning that, after something happens, Twitter does what they do best, and they go through the receipts. And so upon digging through Christian's tweets, some tweets being recent, some not so recent, basically this man was a coon. The brother was a coon, okay? And not just because he dated a white woman. He actually went on many rants about like how white women were better than black women, and that kind of thing that men like to gaslight black women over when we bring it up by calling us bitter or saying that we're just angry because somebody doesn't prefer us. Of course, that's not the case. You can prefer whatever you would like without bashing people who look just like you, okay? People do it every day, and you don't really see people really bashing their own race to outside groups of people the way in which black men specifically do. And he was African, as you could tell by his name. So you are supposed to be connected to the motherland. And I mean, it's fine if you would like to date outside of your race, but you could even just tell when you looked at a lot of the pictures that were on his social media account, I didn't see him hanging around black people. Not to say he did it, but he was definitely one of those guys, one of those people who clearly it was more than just a love-win scenario. This is a lifestyle for you. You know what I'm saying? You habitually date white women. You habitually hang around white people. You habitually express anti-black or anti-black woman rhetoric and sentiments. So all of those things combined are what I think a lot of black women kind of rolled their eyes about. And as a result, I will not be fighting. I mean, I'm not outraged. A lot of people were saying, hey, good for you. You got taken out by your preference. Like I said, I'm not celebrating the man's demise. And even when you look at him, I mean, God bless the dead, but he just looks like one of those type of dudes. I'm just gonna be honest. It's giving fresh and fit. And somebody said he was cool with the fresh and fit dudes, but I'm kind of going off on a tangent. I digress. And I won't even spend that much time on today's reading, but I did want to point out some things for you guys, just to put it into an astrological perspective, because that's what I do here. And it's very interesting. So I was able to do some digging, okay? And Christian was born on April 12th, 1994. So a lot of reports and even his GoFundMe stated that, unfortunately, this occurred a week before his 28th birthday. So he would be 28 next week on the 12th. And the first thing that stood out to me was that birth number 12, as the number 12 deals with victimization and sacrifice. Okay. And when I pulled up his chart, I saw that Christian has his sun at the 23rd degree of Aries. Now, of course, and I just thought it was so interesting with this incident also occurring during Aries season. Like, Aries is subject to lots of violence. Aries at its worst can be the embodiment of shootings. And I mean, I've even posted on here, Aries season, every time, like clockwork, you see an uptick in shootings or gun violence, but even stabbings, in some cases, domestic situations, fights, lots of, things like that. So I thought that was really interesting considering the manner of his death, right? Him dying a violent death, him being stabbed to death, all of this happening in Aries season as he is an Aries sun. That is so crazy to me. But it's astrologically very much on par. And this is further amplified with his sun forming a death quincunx to his Scorpio North Node. Now, as some of you may be aware, in a lot of my videos, I do speak on Scorpio on the nodes. And it's interesting because he would technically be approaching his inverse nodal return really soon with transiting South Node in the sign of Scorpio. And what this does for a person, your inverse nodal return, basically is like a checkpoint that kind of triggers or activates the themes of your nodes. And it can manifest in like major life events. And I could definitely see how, unfortunately, like death could be one of those things. But just in general, and not every Scorpio North Node, of course not, but a lot of Scorpio North Nodes, and just from like pattern wise, my observation, these are people who can be subject to premature death, also reinforced with his Pluto conjoined to his North Node as well. His Pluto is at the 27th degree and he died at the age of 27. So it can get that literal, and that concise. So I thought that was very interesting to see. But that quincunx between his Aries sun and that Scorpio North Node speaks to, once again, a violent death. It could speak to a person who, a lot of times in this lifetime is going to, either they could live hard lives, or could be subject to, struggle or power struggles and conflicts and confrontations, and where things could get really messy for them, especially by way of like their dating life too, from what I've noticed. So I thought that was interesting. But as an Aries himself, he's not above being someone who's violent or toxic, because that could be a very toxic kind of situation as well when we talk about that quincunx. And a lot of people were talking about how toxic their relationship was, he and the young woman. Okay. Also with him being a Taurus South Node, this can make him shallow, especially as it pertains to women. And then also making him the type to kind of just lean more towards like the standard or status quo, conventional standards of beauty, which is what? White women, especially with Venus in conjunction to the moon. So, there's that. Then he also has his Venus, okay? His Venus is at the 13th degree of Taurus. The number 13 is also a number that could deal with death as well. But it could also deal with like surprising circumstances. It's opposing his Jupiter at the 11th degree of Scorpio. That could also be a toxic relationship. That can be a dynamic where, once again, there's a lot of control issues, suspicion, infidelity. I'm almost sure of it. But, like near death or death experiences, it just is what it is. I also intuitively feel like this aspect could be symbolic of the woman being with him for his money as well. Now, this woman, her name is Courtney, and I pulled up her chart as well. She is a Taurus sun. Her sun is at the 0 degree of Taurus, so that is in sync with his Venus and his Taurus moon. And I feel like, too, he was one of those black people who were more conservative, especially in his politics, too. And I feel like that's a lot of what they had in common. But also, and it could deal with them living with one another, too, especially with his Venus moon conjunction, where he is just somebody who's accustomed to probably, just moving in with girlfriends and stuff like that. But moreover, she's a Gemini moon. Right there, I was like, okay, Gemini moons can have not only dual personalities, but with her moon forming a semi-square to her Aries Mars, y'all. And this is an aspect that could also add to a lot of, volatile nature, right? Or where she could have a personality that could be kind of unhinged. And some ways it could be like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing, where behind closed doors, maybe that's kind of who she is as a person and how she operates. So, once again, something else I found it interesting. Her moon may or may not be, depending on what time she was born, conjoined to her Venus in Gemini. I'm pretty sure that was cheating and infidelity there on both parts. But I digress. It also kind of lends itself to a person who has this like duplicitous or dual mode of operation. So it's like, maybe there could be one way on the outside and nobody really knows what's taking place behind closed doors, if you catch my drift. But it could also make her, obviously, Gemini moons, depending on how their moons are aspected, can be unstable. Now, her moon, for the most part, was in really good condition. So at first, I was like, I don't think she's crazy. But her moon is forming an opposition to Pluto. Now, the moon in opposition to Pluto, in and of itself, can be a very devastating aspect that can bring about like a lot of like a lack of inner peace. We're talking about meltdowns, psychiatric, like these are people who can have psychiatric episodes. And when you consider the fact that her moon is in Gemini, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. These are people who are very sensitive and, mentally, cognitively, that opposition to Pluto can really do a number on you. Like, number one, it can give a person murderous tendencies. And I thought it was interesting that her boyfriend she murdered him in the house. But it could also just make her someone who is, these are people who could snap, they could black out. Like I said, they're hopping in and out of, their different personalities and states of being, and upside of them completely takes over. These are people who can actually be very, very Looney Tune, very mental. So, I'm like, there's something to that. But I do want to get to the most important part of this reading, which is that Courtney, and Christian had a South Node synastry, Sun South Node synastry, which I always preach and advocate against if you are going to be in romantic relationships. And this is because the person's sun, the sun individual, triggers a lot of your South Node tendencies, which is something that we're supposed to be kind of getting away from. You can never completely remove yourself from it, but you're supposed to not lean into those things and be tempted into diving into your South Node patterns and behaviors in this lifetime. And so Christian has his sun conjoined to Courtney's South Node. She's a Aries South Node. Her South Node is at the 16th degree. The number 16 deals with tragedy, catastrophe. Okay? His sun on her South Node, it speaks for itself. It could deal with where they have had a very violent relationship. And once again, this could be on both ends. A lot of Aries South Nodes come from many of these people in past lives were warriors. I'm surprised she didn't shoot them. These are people who can collect guns, but also knives. The knife thing is very on par. It just is. So, something happening, her stabbing him, like maybe him hitting her or assaulting her assaulting him, where there's just a lot of conflict. And initially, these people are drawn towards each other because they're very much alike in a lot of ways. It could be a past life connection. They feel very familiar to one another, right? It could also be maybe even a lot of sexual attraction when we talk about that Aries energy. But beyond that, shit can quickly go left because you got two people who can be very headstrong, inconsiderate, very, like I said, violent, crass, confrontational. And her Mars is at the 20th degree of Aries as well, conjoined to that South Node. So it's just, you can't make this shit up, okay? Her Mars in conjunction to his sun, that's her attacking him, okay? That's her being his attacker. She also has that Saturn at the 1st degree of Aries. That could also make her hyper masculine, very, once again, conflict driven, and also the type of person too who's very dominant. She can be a very dominant woman, a very bossy woman. Now, the whole conundrum between that Libra Aries polarity for a lot of people with Libra and Aries on the nodes, particularly obviously Aries South nodes, is that their temper, because this could have been an abrupt kind of decision for her to do this, right? Like I said, snapping, like, okay, something happening in the spur of the moment, boom. Next thing you know, he's stabbed up, he's dead, but it can catapult you into that Libra North Node energy in the sense of, okay, now you're in trouble with the law. Now you're entangled. You're in entanglement with the law. Jupiter, for her, is at the 11th degree of Capricorn, squaring her nodes, which is another reason why I do feel like she's very much, it gives like opportunist vibes. She just is very much an opportunist. But that could also, once again, deal with her getting into a lot of legal trouble. She also has the quintessential jail aspect, Sun square Neptune. But then also that could deal with a person. I mean, Neptune and negative aspects to, the sun or certain personal planets could result in not only just jail, but being institutionalized in other ways. And so I think that's also where the psychiatric home or whatever the case may be comes into play, right? If she gets sent to a psych ward or so on and so forth. But I think she's not going to get in that much trouble. And I say this maybe so in comparison to the standard person who murdered someone, right? And I say this because from an astrological standpoint, of course, she does have her Saturn forming a sextile to her Uranus. And I mean, that could deal with where maybe she knows, or maybe she has a father. And intuitively, I get that she has parents who are very powerful, maybe a father, male influence, somebody in her family, especially with her Saturn at the 1st degree, who could possibly know someone. She actually gives me, especially with Aries on the South Node and Mars, she could be like, a military brat. And I could be wrong. Y'all feel free to let me know if you know anything about her. But it kind of gives that, or where, like I said, somebody who knows somebody. So, like, these are people who can have favors done for them. Saturn, for her, is also trining her Pluto. So that's also really good in terms of, producing favorable outcomes, especially with her being a part of that Pluto Sagittarius generation. Sagittarius could also deal with the law. And then she has her moon, sextiling Saturn. Now, these are people who could probably maybe even talk their way out of situations. And then with her sun squaring Neptune, I'm wondering if she's going to play the victim card. I'm pretty sure she will. But to her benefit, her Saturn is also sextiling Neptune. So it may very well work. The victim card, the crazy card, may very well work. She also has Mars squaring Saturn, so that's something else that could kind of make her unhinged. Also, too, I feel like drugs and or alcohol could have been involved. Her chart gives me cokehead vibes, especially with that Mars in Aries. But it could also even deal with, like, of course, and allegedly, right? Allegedly, But her chart also gives like maybe alcohol or whatever the case may be. You know, a lot of these people can kind of spaz under those influences. And with that Moon Pluto opposition, she probably likes to get shitty, pissy, blacked out, you know, kind of drunk. So, of course, we don't know definitively what kind of state of mind she was in when this occurred, but, you know, circumstantially, or, you know, I could kind of, you know, this is just my perspective on this. And then finally, looking at the transits for Christian during the time of his murder, I thought this was also very interesting. Transiting ascendant was in Scorpio. We all know Scorpio rules death. Transiting Uranus was in Taurus and conjoined to his natal Venus. So this could be an upset, or, you know, something, maybe him finding out something about her, her finding out something about him. This could also even deal with like a potential breakup too, okay, in a relationship. And y'all can, I mean, you already know like where I'm going with that. So in terms of like the nature of their argument, or what brought on this physical confrontation. And then finally, we have transiting Venus squaring his Pluto at the 27th degree. Once again, with him being 27 years old at time of death, Venus square Pluto is one of the, I mean, it's the main transit or main aspect that can deal with killing a partner or being killed by a significant other. So, you know, and in a way where he probably ain't even see it coming, especially with transiting Venus and Aquarius. So, yeah, this concludes my reading. Y'all drop down in the comment section if y'all have any thoughts or things you would like to contribute. And I will catch y'all in the next video. Bye.